India is a country that is expected to play a central role in the 21st century. Having a large and fast-growing economy, it is also strengthening its military and is well positioned to dominate South Asia and extend its influence beyond it. But it must also face notable challenges both domestically and geopolitically. I'm your host Kasim, welcome to another KJ vid. Just before we begin, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can help to fund our videos and make KJ vids self-sustainable. Sadly, due to the nature of our videos, YouTube consistently demonetizes them as they apparently fit in the politically sensitive category. You can also access our full reports and exclusive content by becoming our Patreon member from as little as $1 per month. To understand India's current international role and to anticipate the one it will have in the coming decades, it is necessary to analyse the geographic fundamentals of its power. The first thing to consider is its dimension. India is a vast state, and this has several positive and negative implications. On the one hand, this means that India can benefit from notable strategic depth, but on the other it also means that connecting all of the parts of its territory is a difficult endeavour. This must be considered along with India's configuration. Its territory presents a wide range of environments and climatic areas. Far to the north there are the towering mountains of the Himalaya, a formidable geographic barrier that separates it from China. This is important considering the complicated relations between the two powers. Then there are the fertile valleys of the Ganges and other rivers, which are vital sources of water and useful communication lanes that have favoured agriculture, industrialisation and energy production. The Deccan Plateau that occupies the southern part of the peninsula is another notable geographic feature, also because of its mineral resources. India holds quite abundant ore deposits that have helped its industrialisation. In terms of energy, while it has its own production of oil and other fossil fuels, this is not sufficient to meet the country's large and expanding needs. Other areas include jungles, arid deserts and tropical shores, which all present both advantages and challenges. For instance, the Thar Desert between India and Pakistan is a useful buffer zone, but is also a problem for economic development. Finally, in terms of position, India occupies most of South Asia, and its location favours both defence and power projection. As seen before, it benefits from good natural barriers to the north, but at the same time its neighbours are not friendly. To the northeast, China is getting every day more powerful, and its geopolitical ambitions are a matter of concern for India. To the northwest lays Pakistan, which apart from being India's arch nemesis since the 1947 partition, has also built close ties with China. But while the situation to the north is very challenging for India, its southern borders are very favourable. There, the coast extends for thousands of kilometres on the open ocean. This means three things. First, that there are no hostile powers at the border that threaten India's security, even though it does not positively see China's activities in that maritime area. Secondly, this grants India an easy access to offshore resources and most importantly to sea trade. This is also favoured by the fact that India is located midway between East Asia and Europe, two of the world's richest economic areas, plus to the Middle East and its energy resources. Thirdly, this enables India to project its power with little effort, notably through its navy. Yet there are also challenges deriving from India's position, notably linked to climate change. Having a typical monsoon climate characterised by cycles of abundant rainfalls and dry periods, South Asia is extremely exposed to its effects, as demonstrated by the seriousness and frequency of recent phenomena like droughts, floods and violent storms. Moreover, this also favours the spread of pests and disease. All such factors bear enormous costs both in the form of direct damage and of prevention efforts, and is a notable obstacle to India's development. The rise of India as a major power largely lays on its economic development. In 2017, its GDP rose by 6.7%, and to date is the world's fourth in terms of purchasing power parity. Its economy is diversified, and several Indian firms have become major players in global business. Financially, India is generally stable, even though it experienced some troubles in recent years. But the country is not yet fully developed. Infrastructures remain insufficient and inefficiency exists in various sectors. Whilst unemployment is low, less than 9% in 2017, larger shares of the population continue to live below the poverty line, and traditional agriculture still absorbs a considerable portion of the workforce. Income inequality remains strong, with large differences in wealth distribution between upper and lower classes and between different regions. In the demographic dimension, India has a population of around 1.28 billion people, making it the second largest in the world just behind China, and it is expected to surpass it in the coming years. Most Indians are young, which is positive for its economic development. But at the same time, having a big population also brings several challenges. Achieving food and energy security becomes more difficult, as well as providing public services such as healthcare. Moreover, this raises the problem of overcrowding and pollution, especially in large cities. Finally, the differences in wealth distribution can result into social tensions. Most of the population lives in the north, where a considerable Muslim minority is also present, but these areas are poorer than the southern parts of the country. In this regard, it should also be noted that India has been fighting for decades against the insurgency of a Maoist group called the Naxalites. Nevertheless, India continues its rise also in military terms. It can field a large force that regularly participates to international exercises, and over the past few years it has been spending around 2.5% of its GDP in defence expenditures to modernise its armed forces. The Navy holds a particular importance as it represents the means to project its power across the Indian Ocean. As of today, the Indian Navy operates a large fleet that includes an aircraft carrier, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, and several other units. In cooperation with Russia, India is also developing the BrahMos hypersonic cruise missile. Finally, it must not be forgotten that India is a nuclear power with an estimated stockpile of more than 100 warheads. For decades, India has maintained a non-aligned policy of which it has been one of the leaders. But non-alignment does not mean neutrality. As a matter of fact, India has pursued its own national interests and has been involved in several conflicts. Its oldest rival is of course Pakistan. Immediately after the partition in 1947, the two fought a major war followed by another two in 1965 and 1971, plus a series of skirmishes. Today the relations remain tense, but the conflict remains frozen because both states have developed a nuclear strike capacity. The main point of the divergence is Kashmir, which remains divided between India, Pakistan and China, who controls the Aksai Chin since the 1962 war with India. Apart from having become a symbol of the Indo-Pakistani rivalry, Kashmir also has a strategic importance for these powers. Ruling it allows to control the flow of water along the Indus Valley, with all the consequences for human and economic development. For India, Kashmir is the gateway towards Central Asia, as well as a region to control in order to prevent Pakistan from cooperating with its powerful Chinese ally. On the other hand, for Pakistan, dominating it is necessary to have more strategic depth and to preserve its connection with China, especially now that they are working together to develop the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, also known as CPEC, an ambitious infrastructure project that connects the two countries and that Islamabad considers fundamental to boost its economy, even though there are concerns over the debts its completion will bring. This makes it clear that Pakistan is not India's only strategic problem, and not even the main one. In recent years, China has become the prominent national security concern for India. One reason is China's close ties with Pakistan, but there are also direct disputes between Beijing and New Delhi, namely over the aforementioned Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal Pradesh belongs to India, but it is claimed by China, and it represents a unique strategic challenge for New Delhi. As a matter of fact, it is connected to the rest of India only via a narrow passage choked between China and Bangladesh and known as the Chicken Neck. India fears that in case of a conflict, the Chinese will rapidly overtake the Arunachal Pradesh by attacking this passage and cutting it from the rest of its territory. In addition, Beijing and New Delhi are engaged in a geopolitical competition in South Asia. In 2017, the two powers faced each other in a military standoff over the Doklam Plateau, a strategic territory traditionally belonging to Bhutan, which is traditionally close to India but is claimed by China, and since then they have been building up their military forces along the border. China is also establishing ties with Nepal, raising concerns that the country may fall under its control, which would allow it to directly threaten northern India. New Delhi has similar concerns over Bangladesh, because if it were to adopt a pro-Chinese stance, the Chicken Neck would become even more vulnerable. But the Sino-Indian rivalry is not limited to South Asia. The two are also competing in Indochina, where each of them is promoting its own economic and political projects. New Delhi is doing so on the basis of its Look East policy, launched in the 90s, whereas China considers this region an important element of its broader One Belt, One Road strategy. In this regard, it is notable that India has refused to cooperate with China in this ambitious project. Another country where their interest collides is Iran. India considers Iran a potentially precious ally because it would allow to take Pakistan between two fires. Moreover, it is also a source of oil. But for these very same results, and to counter the United States, China is also interested in building a partnership with Iran. Last but not least, there is the maritime dimension. Beijing is fostering its ties and establishing a greater presence in the Indian Ocean in the optic of developing its maritime Silk Road to connect its territory with Europe and the Middle East and by sea. But New Delhi considers this as its own ocean and as an essential area for its plans to extend its influence on a global scale. Therefore, it is concerned by Beijing's initiatives, notably in countries like Sri Lanka and the Maldives. In regard to the Maldives, the political turmoil that has affected the archipelago was largely to be interpreted in the optic of the Sino-Indian rivalry, and the recent electoral victory of Mohammed Saleh seems to have marked a point in favour of India. As a consequence of its rivalry with Beijing, New Delhi is also developing closer ties with other capitals that share similar security interests. The most notable trend is the gradual rapprochement with Washington. Even though it was never openly opposed to the United States during much of the Cold War, India sympathised with the USSR and its relations with America were rather cold. But now that both are concerned over China's rise, they are gradually establishing more cooperation, notably in security terms. India is following a similar policy with Japan and Australia, two other powers that are also worried over the initiatives of China. Together, these four states form the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, an informal framework to ensure stability in the Indo-Pacific. Two other noteworthy partners for India are Israel and the EU. The relations with Israel are complicated by India's tilt towards Iran, but the Jewish state remains an important partner as an arms supplier and for technological cooperation. On its part, the EU has a central role for India's trade. Lastly, it should also be mentioned that New Delhi is increasing its economic cooperation with Africa as well. This overview allows to draw some conclusions on India's current and future role. The country finds itself at a crossroad. It has all the potential to emerge as a major world power, but to achieve this objective it must successfully solve the multiple challenges it is facing. Only time will tell to what extent it will manage to, but what is sure is that India is a power to monitor, and that in any case it will have a considerable impact in world affairs in the coming years. That's all for today guys, thanks for watching another KJ vid. We would love to hear your views in the comments below. Finally, don't forget to support us on Patreon so we can produce more of these geopolitical reports. That's all for today, see you next time.